Welcome to Talk Radio, and I'm delighted to have him here, the Right Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg, Leader of the House of Commons. First up, Jacob, and I mean this, thank you, because it has been almost impossible to find a cabinet minister or anybody that has surfaced in the last 24 hours. Why are you sat here?
Well, I read this in the papers this morning, and I think it's because lots of cabinet ministers hadn't been asked, because I'd have come out like a shot, so I'm here now.
He's a fan of Talk Radio, and for that we're very grateful. You know, because we've spoken, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration. Let's start with Geraint in Cardiff. It's curveball. What qualities do you, Jacob Rees-Mogg, expect from your leader and your Prime Minister?
I expect leadership. And what do I mean by that? The ability to make the difficult decisions. And I see that in the Prime Minister, that I think if you look at the COVID pandemic, he has made a whole succession of really difficult decisions facing information that at times has been very frightening. The forecasts of the number of deaths that would take place, the decision then in the other direction to open up in the summer and not have more restrictions in December. He's the one who has to decide, and you need somebody who has that leadership quality and is willing to be decisive.
If a decisive man who is the Prime Minister and who is good at those making those decisions, do you honestly expect us to believe that that same man didn't know that a gathering with wine, snacks and people socialising that said bring a bottle wasn't a party?
Well, first of all, we've got to wait for what Sue Gray has to say about this, because it is being looked into. Secondly, the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box this morning that with hindsight he would not have behaved as the behaviour was on that occasion.
Would you have gone if you'd been invited?
He apologised.
Would you have gone?
Well, I wasn't invited. It's very hard to answer hypothetical questions because I wasn't invited. Actually, I did look at my diary just out of curiosity to see what I was doing, and we had the Privy Council that day, which was on Zoom. But I think the Prime Minister has worked tirelessly over the last 2 years. Remember, he almost himself died from COVID. He came back to work extremely quickly. He'd only been back to work a few weeks by this date. And that's his commitment to his country.
And Jacob, let me jump in for a reason. That is exactly why so many people are frustrated. I read an amazing article by Michael Gove's soon-to-be ex-wife Sarah Vine over the weekend, and she said that she used to walk from her kitchen past Michael Gove's study, and 24 hours a day you lot were at it, making really, really difficult decisions as people died and the country went into something they'd never experienced. And her frustration now is that this has been thrown away by the hard work and all the effort by these ridiculous decisions. The Prime Minister kept saying today, I wish I'd done things differently. What does that actually mean? Does that mean the party shouldn't have happened, or he shouldn't have gone, or he should have checked it out? Because I don't understand how he doesn't assume that bring a bottle is not a party, Jacob.
We do know that he didn't see that email, so he didn't.
He definitely hasn't seen the email.
He didn't see that email. Let's contextualise. We are talking about a 700-day period, more or less, when the government has been working tirelessly, when the Prime Minister particularly has been leading the country and, in my mind, getting the big decisions right, which is why the vaccine rollout worked so well, why we are the first country really to be coming out of restrictions, and the brave decision he made not to impose restrictions before
I agree
Christmas.
with all of that.
And out of this 700-day period, we're saying for 25 minutes, the Prime Minister may have done something.
But in 24 hours he went from not remembering just wait till Sue Gray to yes I did. Do you understand, Jacob, that people will be going, why weren't you honest yesterday?
Hold on. He didn't make any statement yesterday.
He said wait for the inquiry.
That was a line that was coming from the government, but he was at the dispatch box today, as he is on every Wednesday.
Yes, I know.
When the House is sitting, the Prime Minister is questioned on Wednesdays. When he was up to be questioned, he gave the answer. I think that's perfectly reasonable to give the answer on the day you are appearing in Parliament. Of course I believe the Prime Minister.
Did you attend any parties or gatherings or work dues?
I was at work during most of the pandemic.
Did you go into a garden and have a drink with 40 people?
No, I did not go into a garden and have a drink with 40 people. My family's quite large, but it's not that large. I've got 6 children.
Do you understand the frustration, the anger and the disillusionment with people who gave him an 80-seat majority and bought into the levelling up and bought into that and have now been left thinking, Jacob, and you and I are on the same page on this is bloody frustrating for people. It's lying.
The PM himself said today that he really understands how angry people are. That's why he has apologised. He understands. And bear in mind, he himself almost died. Of course he and his family understand how painful this was for people.
But when you make a rule and then you break it and it's found out 2 years later, people don't respect you.
Let's wait for the details of the inquiry.
All right, let's what happened. Let's go with that. Let's say the inquiry with Sue Gray. This is what I wanted to say to you actually. Let's say the inquiry with Sue Gray finds, because I don't think there's any way out of this, that there's 2 answers. One is he didn't know anything about it and he's absolutely in the clear. I guarantee you that most people will think that's a whitewash. If she finds him guilty, he will be asked to resign. Now, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives this afternoon, Douglas Ross, has said his position is untenable and he should go. How do you answer that, Douglas Ross?
Douglas Ross never supported the Prime Minister. Douglas Ross opposed the Prime Minister on Brexit. He's opposed him consistently. Douglas Ross is one of those people, and there are a number of them, who have never liked the Prime Minister for a variety of reasons and have always taken any opportunity to take a pot shot at him. The Scottish Secretary, who I would listen to 100 times more than I would listen to Douglas Ross, is fully supporting the Prime Minister.
One of the things that Dave, the producer of the show, said to me this morning was that Keir Starmer had been very quiet. I'm going to ask this question both ways. What if another photo comes out? What if another party? What if another Dominic Cummings, piece of information? We're being told at the moment, wait for the inquiry. Do you and your colleagues believe there's any more revelations?
Well, I think you ask a very interesting and important question. The Prime Minister got a majority of 80 given to him by the British people. And you're now saying, will there be a continuing campaign of disobliging leaks by Dominic Cummings? Who do you think should decide who our Prime Minister is? British people who voted, or Dominic Cummings, who's upset at having lost office, who himself, I don't know whether he has yet been to Specsavers, but we all know about his eyesight problems.
I remember the government defending him over the ludicrous Barnard Castle debacle. By the way, yesterday, whilst I was on air, this was fantastic. We were talking about Boris Johnson, and this was fantastic, Jacob, and Dominic Cummings, and the Traffic and Travel cited a minor accident on the road heading out of Barnard Castle, and nobody could go. What I'm saying is, has he got any more on Boris Johnson? Because I don't understand how the Prime Minister of this country, knowing that this guy's got whatever on him, let him go like that. Why didn't they take the box off him before he walked out the front door?
But the Prime Minister has a great quality, which is loyalty to the people who work for him. And
misplaced? Misplaced?
Well, if you go back to Barnard Castle, he was extremely loyal to Dominic Cummings.
It was a mistake there now, wasn't it?
And if you look back on it, you see that no good turn goes unpunished.
Martin Reynolds, the man who organised the party, the personal private secretary, nobody can have missed Allegra Stratton, who, in practising in that sort of amphitheatre of questions in 10 Downing Street, was off the record filmed laughing, forced to resign, crying like a baby. Again, people were affronted because people were not able to go to funerals, get married, visit their sick parents, and she's laughing about it. She resigned. Why hasn't Martin Reynolds been the fall guy today? I'm fully expecting Martin Reynolds to take. Why hasn't the party organised for him to be gone?
It wouldn't be reasonable for me to comment on an individual civil servant. There is an inquiry going on. There are HR protocols within the civil service.
If he worked for you, would you fire him, Jacob?
But he doesn't work for me.
No, but if he did, Jacob.
He doesn't work for me.
If a civil servant of yours had done that to you, would you sell them down the river?
Constitutionally, ministers do not fire civil servants.
Who does then?
The senior civil servant is the cabinet secretary.
He's not the best, is he, Simon Case?
Well, ministers work with the civil servants that the civil service gives to them, and this is important constitutionally because we have an apolitical civil service, and therefore it wouldn't be right for ministers to pick and choose their favourite civil servants.
Jacob Rees-Mogg is making a big mistake on thinking he can come onto talkRADIO and defend the indefensible. The whole cabinet should resign, says Mary. What would you say to that? Because I actually applaud the fact you've come on, because I am into believing that there are all sides to everything, and I thank you for coming on. What would you say about the people who now say, if Boris Johnson and this continues and has to go, are the rest of you, I mean, Rishi Sunak, I mean, that's really, I'd love your responses. Where's he today? 400 miles away. If that doesn't smack up, what do you have, a dental appointment or something? Why has he gone to Cornwall?
I'm sure he had very important business in Cornwall to
Brilliant.
Consider the state of the nation. But what I would say to Mary is that the whole cabinet understands why people are cross. We completely understand that people followed the rules assiduously, and that the upset of people who lost family members, 150,000 deaths have occurred with people who have had COVID. That is a terrible individual event. I mean, statistics are so unhelpful in this.
But that's why people are angry.
And look, there's no pretending that they're not.
My dad was in a care home, and yesterday morning was the first time that I was angry at your Prime Minister from a personal point of view, because I thought, hold on a minute, however we dress this up, email or no email, works, party or drinks do, I couldn't see my dying dad in a care home and he's having a couple of beers at the back of 10 Downing Street. That's the reality, Jacob.
That's why the Prime Minister has apologised before the report has come out, because he recognises that with hindsight, this is not what he wishes he had done.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that over 700 days, the Prime Minister has been working tirelessly, that a lot of his decisions have been right and to the benefit of the whole country.
Do you think he can get the country back on side, Jacob?
I think the Prime Minister is a formidable leader. He is a very charismatic figure. I cannot think there could be anybody else who could lead the country better.
It's interesting.
And I think it is really important that he carries on. I think he's doing... He's got the big and difficult calls right. And go back to Christmas.
Oh, but come on, that was because 101 MPs debated. Did he not want to carry out the COVID check? People tell me that he wanted to bring restrictions in, and it was the Cabinet and the fact that 101 Tory MPs rebelled against him that made him actually make the decision he did. And, of course, in hindsight, after Drakeford and Sturgeon, he looked great.
You put me in a difficult position because I can't answer that in detail without breaking confidences. But I can say, without breaking confidences, that it was the Prime Minister very much who wanted not to impose those restrictions.
Any right-minded person in any walk of life with this much stress of a job, feeling you're in the mire all the time, would probably get, Jacob, to a point where they go, I've had enough. Can you see Boris Johnson quitting, walking away, or would he have to be dragged out of 10 Downing Street by your very famous colleagues who stick the knife in when they're ready?
Well, I almost invariably wear a grey suit, so I am probably a man in the greyest of grey suits, and I think it's overwhelmingly the national interest that we support the Prime Minister. I think he is such a formidable leader who has done things to our overwhelming long-term benefit, and whether you're talking about Brexit or you're talking about decisions he made over COVID.
All of that is fine, but let me ask you, let me personalise this for you. You were in the chamber yesterday, or maybe it was today, DUP MP Jim Shannon. He cried talking about his mother-in-law dying alone of COVID. Can you and your colleagues look Jim Shannon full square in the face and say, we were at a drink, not you, the Prime Minister's at a drinks party and you couldn't see your mother-in-law, we're really sorry. Does he believe you, Jim Shannon?
Jim Shannon is a wonderful man, a most brilliant parliamentarian. Jim and I, Assembly of the House, work relatively closely together, and he is a great contributor to Parliament. He is there more than any other MP. And what he said was desperately moving. And that's why it was right that the Prime Minister apologised today and said that with hindsight he would have done things differently. But I would say that everybody makes mistakes. It is only human, that nobody gets every decision right. But you have to look at the overall picture of the Prime Minister's leadership which is formidably in the interests of the nation.
One thing that I was told, well, not that I was told, was in the news a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't surprised, because politics fascinates me, and people will criticise it. People are saying this is really upsetting, this interview, because you should be shouting at Jacob Rees-Mogg, and others are saying, you're being honest, fair pay. You in Cabinet suggested the 1.25% national insurance hike should be at best put to a side to help those struggling to get by. For a man who has wealth, and I'm not criticising you, and who has come from a good background, I thought that said an awful lot about you as a human being. That was rejected by your Cabinet colleagues. Now, we talk about a Tory party who needs to regain the organic trust of the British people, this levelling up agenda. How do you feel about a suggestion that is, I think, brilliant, being thrown out by your colleagues?
Well, taxation's a matter for the Chancellor, so perhaps we'll have to ring him in Cornwall to find out his view. But I think many people in the Cabinet, and I can't say what I said in Cabinet. The Cabinet is confidential, and I know it always gets leaked, but I don't want to confirm leaks. What we are all worried about is the cost of living, and whether the inflationary problem is a temporary one or a permanent one, whether the monetary easing, the printing of money that's taken place now for the best part of 15 years, has created a fundamental and institutional, effectively, inflationary problem, or whether it's all a matter of temporary disruptions to supply chains. Because this is going to be the big challenge for the government over the next year. It is, and potentially longer, is trying to ensure that the cost of living is manageable, and the cost of living inevitably hits people on lower incomes most.
I know you're in a hurry, so let me tell you.
I'm not in a hurry, because
Well,
this is important, but I do want to finish the point. But the one thing you have to remember is almost everybody lives to the limit of his or her income.
Yep.
And therefore, you're not just talking about people on low incomes, you're talking on people who may be on what appear to be quite good incomes, but if suddenly their gas bill doubles, and if suddenly their mortgage goes up, they've been living to their maximum of their income, and they have to look at how they deal with that. And this becomes an inflationary problem, because then they need pay increases, and you institutionalise inflation. So this is a real challenge for the government, and it is important that we get the policies right. And I think the answer to policy challenges always come from a Conservative direction.
Well, let me put something to you, and I'm delighted that I mean this, because the people outside are saying you've got to go. 2 final questions, Jacob, and I really appreciate it. I'll give you a quote, and I'll probably get the quote wrong, and later on they'll tell me off. The number of people, Tory voters, who have phoned and emailed and texted and said, this is not the Conservative government that we voted for, the Libertarian Conservative government of low taxation. They say this government has turned into a green agenda, right? And has spent money we haven't got. So I voted blue, I've got green, and we're now in the red. And I'm being serious. I know you're a staunch Tory. Surely the first and most important way to deal with the cost of living crisis is to get rid of this crazy green agenda, get people's energy bills down, and make people understand that priorities are heating your house, paying your bills, and feeding your kids.
What the Prime Minister has said on this is that he is not in favour of a green agenda that makes people cold and poor. His view is that you can do this through technological solutions. And I agree with that. I think that the development of hydrogen is potentially a game changer. The increase in nuclear power, particularly the modular nuclear power, is going to be fundamentally important. But you're absolutely right that takes time to get to.
Of course it does. And it's now, isn't it?
And it cannot be in the interests of the government to put unreasonable burdens on people. And therefore it's about making the energy sector cleaner and greener, but at a pace that allows it to be affordable. That must be fundamental, and that is the Prime Minister's view.
Final question, and I know you don't like hypothetical questions, but I'll try again. If the inquiry from Sue Gray comes back that 40 people attended a bring your own bottle in the garden of Number 10 and broke the law, a law created by Boris Johnson's government, and that included in the party MPs and Prime Ministers, should they, Jacob Rees-Mogg, hypothetically if it happens, all resign and be fined and prosecuted the exact same fines that people were fined for going and apparently breaking laws in May 2020?
I mean, it is a hypothetical. We have to wait for the inquiry. I think you raise another interesting question, and I'm sorry you'll think this is a politician's trick of answering a different question, but I think you come on something very interesting. We are going to have the review into COVID, and we need to look, one of the things we must look at is whether the approach to restrictions and the penalties for restrictions was right. In case we ever have a pandemic in future, because we did have that ridiculous case of a couple of ladies having a cup of coffee, and I think it was the Derbyshire police who were always extraordinarily...
they were sat on a bench having a cup of coffee and they got fined, and the
and,
Prime Minister's having a drink in his garden.
Well, I think they weren't fined in the end, actually.
Oh, were they not?
No, I mean, I will bear correction on this, but I don't think they were.
Hypothetical.
But we need to think, and we need to look through what was got right and what was got wrong. The overall policy has worked, and that's why we're doing better than other countries in coming out of it. But we must look about whether restrictions were reasonable throughout the whole period. I mean, I, for one, would never wish churches to be closed again. I thought that was...
I've learnt a lot about you, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I mean this. There will be people that will criticise because they'd expect me to rant and rave at you. I've learnt that you are good enough to come on here and answer questions. I've learnt that you think that Rishi Sunak went to the dentist in Cornwall. Will you come back again? Will you come back after the inquiry or in future? Because it's a pleasure to have you on.
It's an absolute delight to come on. I'm very glad to have met you. It's very nice to meet a celebrity.
No, listen, I'm delighted to meet you, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. This is